Climate change is changing the world drastically. It increases temperature, increases the spreading of diseases, and it makes extreme weather like hurricanes or tsunamis more common. In just the last decade, according to NASA, the temperature has increased several degrees. People with the smallest carbon footprint will be the ones most affected by climate change. The reason for this is because people who are experiencing poverty and can't afford things like electricity or cars that have a carbon footprint will leave the least carbon footprint. However, they also not have enough money to help if someone gets sick or there's a big storm, both of which happen more often because of climate change. It's important to recognize the difference between climate and weather, and in turn climate change and global warming. The EPA says that global warming is the trapping of gases in the atmosphere, causing heat to enter the atmosphere and not be able to leave, thus increasing the temperature of the Earth. Climate change is the change of climate. Duh. Climate is trends that happen over the course of decades of weather. In Minnesota, the climate is extremely cold in the winter, with lots of snow and ice and snow and ice and snow and ice. But it's also warm in the summer with some rain. Weather is something that'll happen over the course of a few hours to a few days. It is simply weather. It will rain or snow, or simply be really cold or really hot. I'm sure we can all agree we love our cold weather, but if we let climate change continue, there won't be any more cold weather. The average American now feels 20% more hot weather now than thousands of years ago. In 2020, it was the 6th warmest year ever recorded. How do we know this didn't used to be the normal temperature? Well, scientists can draw pieces of ice out of glaciers. Things from the ice show the temperature of things like climate. This is the warmest century in the past 2,000 years. Even as we try to figure it out, it is getting worse. A lot worse. It is so easy to ignore. Say it won't happen to me. It's happening to my grandchildren. That is not true. It's happening, it's not fake, and we have to fix it. Climate change affects more than temperature. It changes weather and can cause seas to rise and flood. Scientists all agree that climate change is changing the Earth, and we need to change it back by 2030. Big companies try to convince people that climate change isn't something that all scientists agree on, but that isn't entirely true according to uchicago.edu. 99% of scientists agree that climate change is real. The scientists that say climate change is fake are mostly professionals in other fields and aren't climatologists. You can try to make excuses about it being fake, but the general consensus is it's real. ClimateColumbia.edu says that climate change will cause trillions of dollars worth of damage in the next century. People lose jobs, there will be property damage, and more diseases will come because of all the floods caused by glaciers melting. There will be inland flooding caused by more evaporation leading to more rainfall. Death will become more common because diseases will spread more. Governments need to start realizing that $1 trillion Climate Change Act will be nothing compared to the cost of what climate change will do if not stopped. IFAW.org says that zero emissions by 2050, this and that is not enough. We need zero emissions by 2030. We need to change, and we need to do it now. Big energy companies such as Xcel Energy need to switch to renewable energy sources such as wind and sun. We need to limit waste and use reusable materials. It's not just companies. According to Statista.com, China emitted nearly 12 million metric tons of CO2, and the U.S. emitted nearly 5 million metric tons of CO2. Since 1750, the U.S. and China together have accounted for 38.4% of all CO2 emissions in the thousands of megatons. Also, according to 8 billion trees, U.S. citizens have some of the highest carbon footprint per capita in the world. As you can see on that graph, 14% of the American carbon footprint is food, 32% is home energy, 28% transportation, and 26% spending. Also, the United States, China, and the European Union are some of the top 30 biggest CO2 emitters worldwide. The easiest, but not most helpful thing you can do to help is likely what you've been hearing about your whole life. Turn off the lights when you leave the room. Bigger differences you can make is to campaign for change, or you could do things that will minimize your carbon footprint, but won't help others, like campaigning and raising money would. One of those big things you can do is get solar panels, which will drastically reduce your carbon footprint. But while that will help, it isn't the best solution. We need to hold the big energy companies accountable, like Xcel Energy. While it isn't the only problem, it's one of the bigger ones. getting even 5 companies to be completely carbon neutral would do more than any of us could do in the next year shutting off lights. Write letters to big energy companies, protest and boycott big energy companies. So you can see on here, Amazon and Microsoft are some of the top 2 corporate buyers of clean energy. We need more of these companies to be up here, buying lots of clean energy, even like up here past the graph, because we need lots to be bought. To fix climate change, we need to invest billions of dollars into research, says Greenpeace.org. We also need new methods of making energy that don't use lots of fossil fuels. If we don't go carbon neutral by 2030, climate change will be irreversible. At the end of the day, people need to realize that 7 years from now, climate change will be irreversible. If we don't realize the time to procrastinate is over and the time to act is now. Otherwise, we're already as good as extinct. The human race needs to, as a whole, realize how big a deal this is, and the biggest countries and corporations need to start blowing big bucks on stopping climate change. Not only that, they need to pass laws requiring companies to start limiting, if not stopping, their carbon emissions. If these things don't happen, the human race will die. There is no obvious answer about what I just said. The exception being space travel, but even getting to a literal planet will require much more than 7 years, unless the aliens in Area 51 help. In conclusion, the only answer is still I just mentioned, with 0 emissions by 2030, but even that will be difficult. But when the only other answer is aliens in Area 51, then 0 emissions by 2030 is really our only option.